Now, moving on to our second session of the day, I'm hoping my speaker's going to dial in very, very soon. But whilst she's doing that, I'll introduce her. So we're going to be joined by Dee Samra, who is the Pan-European IT Director for Data Governance and Quality. And she's joining us from Liberty Global. Now, Dee's going to be talking us through how she has been tackling the barriers in the way of great data governance. So I'll give her a moment to dial in and then we'll jump straight into that session. Oh, there she is now. Brilliant. Hi, Dee.
Hi.
Over to you.
Thank you. Excuse the children's desks in the background. Hi, everyone. My title, Data Governance, is my topic. Director of Data Governance from Liberty Global. And I'm here to talk about how I have been tackling data governance in the large organisation that is Liberty Global, and how I found governance doesn't lend itself. It's deemed a dirty word, and it seems that it puts people off. So trying to understand why is that and how to overcome those challenges. Good. So what is data governance? So I mean, I just threw in a Google search response here. It's looking at, I think, mentioned in the previous presentation, it's talking about the usability, the integrity, the security of our data, having the right governing bodies that are looking after that data, setting up procedures and plans to execute those procedures, just to make sure that our data is being utilised and managed as efficiently and as well as possible. So having a data governance charter, classifying, organising, communicating how that is going to be done in your organisation is really important. So in other words, it's understanding who is responsible for our data, what data actually do we have, where is that data, and how are we going to manage it as an organisation? So it all sounds really sensible, right? So the kind of things that you think we would want to be doing. But often I find that governance, data governance, is something that bubbles up bottom up. It's not something that comes down as a top-down directive, right? It's not somebody doesn't wake up one day and say, do you know what, we're going to execute data governance in our organisation. It's a need that comes out of the as was mentioned previously, the masses of data that we have, and in looking after it, we need to look after it. So, using the wrong button. Why is data governance, or why is governance deemed a dirty word? So whenever I introduce myself as the Director of Data Governance, I often get the response, oh, you want to change that? So, and I always wondered, why? And I feel that it is the word governance. If I look it up in a dictionary, a simple task, and look at some of the synonyms that we associate governance with, we have government. I don't think any explanations required there. We have rule and rules. Authority, power, or the flip side. So we've got this very power-hungry, people, not wanting to be told what to do, etc. But you also have it seen as an admin activity, a menial task that is performed somewhere in the corners of the business, and not necessarily something. It's not cool, it's not the latest thing, it's not talking about the latest innovation. And so it's just not something that appeals to most people when they're thinking about their next career move. It's not going to be governance, right? So how do you overcome that? And I think, a quick poll here, it is something that we need to address. And I guess, I would like to get opinions here on what you feel is the biggest blocker. Why are different organisations reluctant to take up data governance? And that, I think, applies to most industries, or many industries. So, and it could be many different reasons. As I mentioned before, you've got company politics, senior stakeholder power grabs. People see it as a menial admin activity. Could be all of those. It could be none of those. So it'd just be interesting to get your view. Give you a few seconds to complete that. Okay, let's see. All of the above. I like it. That's what I went for. That's really powerful, actually. Nearly 50% said all of the above. So 22% have said none of the above. So I'd be very interested to hear what they feel is the driver, or are you saying that your organisation is really keen to do data governance? Which, message me later. I'd be really interested to hear. Okay, so a little bit about where I work. So I work for Liberty Global, and if you're not aware, they are a telecommunications organisation. You might recognise some of the brands on there. So we have Virgin Media in the UK and Ireland, we have Telenet in Belgium, UPC in Switzerland, and UPC Poland and Slovakia, and also a 50% share in Netherlands, Vodafone. So on the face of it, you've got your imagery there that shows you where our footprint is, and we have our brands there. So it tells you quite a bit about Liberty Global as a whole. But actually, who are we? As is defined in many different ways. So you might be more interested in knowing what revenue we generate. You might be interested in how many customers we have. The fact that we passed 25.9 million homes. I mean, that's a huge number. We have 25 million revenue generating units, and we're generating a huge revenue there, 11.5 billion. And this is data, and this is why data is increasingly becoming, well, not increasingly, it already has. It's phenomenal how much the volumes of data are increasing day by day. And why are we doing it, right? We want insights, we want information, we want to be able to drive insights that are going to drive growth in our business, do analytics. Our data science community are there to find the new thing, the next step. What's going to be the big disruptor for our organisation? How do we get ahead of the curve? Little stat in there from Forbes: 1.7 megabytes of data is produced every second for every human being that is on this planet. That is huge. We have more data in the last 2 years than we've had in the entire history of the human race. These are big numbers of data, right? And why? And it's just continuing. It's a continuing trend because we want more information. We want to be able to analyze. We want to know in more detail. We want to know about our products. We want to know about our customers. We want to know about our, finances. How are we going to drive that forward? How do we drive efficiencies? How can we break down customer by different segmentations so that we can market accordingly? How do we look at our products, and how do we package those better, et cetera, et cetera. And that's just about our business, right? But we hold other data. We hold data about our offices, about our employees, and our data becomes more complex. Our employees, for example, may also be our customers, right? And our customers are already segmented, and you're getting the picture here. It gets more and more convoluted. But data is a true asset, and this is, we talk, and I've seen so many organisations use this as their one-liner. We're a data-driven organisation. We're following the data, we're analysing it, we're making smart decisions, and to do that, we do need our data to be treated as an asset, as with any other asset, whether it's your house, your car. We look after those things, we invest in them, we keep them in their top condition, and that's how we will get the best out of it. And it's the same with our data. As an organisation, we're huge. We are a unique organisation. We are large. We are complex, and we do have our own culture and different strengths and opportunities. But actually, data and data governance is a common problem to tackle in across industry. Data is data, and how we handle that data and look after it is something that is common, right? So what's involved? So we have the data management. We talked a lot about that in the previous presentation. This is the movement of data across our organisation, building the data management teams, as was mentioned. They are inundated with requests. And for every request, we often see a new data store is being created, or a new database is stood up, or a new application is installed. And many organisations will find that they have this convoluted problem of a really complex data architecture. The landscape is becoming increasingly complicated. We have overlapping data. We have duplication going on in many different places, and we need to drive that efficiencies, right? And that's a good place to start. But that data must be kept secure. Protecting it is obviously critical, as we've seen in the media. Nobody wants to see any bad press about data not in the wrong hands. So making sure that we're compliant against all regulations is really important for every business, and it's about doing the right thing and obviously avoiding those hefty fines that we've seen more recently. So we might have all of this data and it's moving from A to B, we're keeping it secure, but actually we need to know what that data is, and that's where we need that data inventory. And data inventory will tell us how much data is being stored, where it's being stored, but it doesn't actually tell us what that data means, what that data means to the business and why it's actually deemed as critical or non-critical, whatever the case may be. And that's where the data definition comes in. And this is one of the biggest challenges, I would say, and one of the key elements of data governance, because the data definition is local to where that data is being generated or how it's being used. And this is why actually the data, being as an asset, is owned by the whole organization, and it is used, it's consumed and produced in various different locations across the organization. And at different points, that data means something different to the business. Somebody's taken data from a billing system or a source system, and they've applied some business logic, and they've created a new data metric, a KPI, or whatever that might be. And it needs to be defined, but that definition needs to be local to that area of the organization, and it puts that data into context. And without it, we won't understand what data is, which of our data elements are critical and key to the business. So identifying those critical data elements is what enables us to build that maturity of our data to the point where we can look at later down the line at things like mastering data and having that single source of the truth that we all aspire to. So in getting those data definitions by business domains, we've got the inventory, we've got the security, we've got the data where it needs to be, we've got the data coming in timely, consistent, and that's where our data management team do a great job of making sure that that data is landing where it should be, when it should be, and it makes it business ready, right? So now the business can leverage that data to make those key business decisions that they're looking to make, to do that analysis that they're looking to do, to find, like I say, the next best thing or the next way that we're going to either drive efficiencies or build growth. And we can also then start driving the quality. And when we know our data and we know where it is, we're able to then push that forward and drive better quality. It was mentioned in the previous presentation. The term garbage in, garbage out is a very overused term, and it's very true. There's a lot of people that I speak to in this industry will often tell you that it's great having all these great new tools, but actually, if we're putting garbage in, we're only ever going to get garbage out. And until we address the quality and understanding that data, we're never going to be able to change that. So, and this is why data governance is really key to any organization, because it addresses all of these points. So, given we can see that it's a benefit to the business, why do we find it so difficult to get it landed? So for me, challenge number one is, if data is considered a company asset, then who does the accountability lie with? And this is something that people will argue until the cows come home. It's ultimately it's a company asset, therefore the ownership is enterprise-wide. And herein you will have the battle, right? So if the enterprise asset is valued and it's strategic, then and we want it to be, a shared responsibility, then we have to ensure that it's not being hoarded in silos in different parts of our organization, and that actually the transparency of that data through something like data governance enables the business to understand what data we do have, and it is shared, it is available to the right people as needed, so it becomes our data and not my data by business area. But to enable the business to maintain its responsibility around the data, there has to be accountability. And accountability can't just sit at the very top of an organization. Whilst they may ultimately be accountable for our data, there is a responsibility by each and every person in the business, and every business domain, and certainly every core business data set must have an accountable owner. And this is where we'll see a lot of challenge, because it's who should that be? So it's assigning business owners by business domains to our core data sets, and ensuring that they then have a data steward or data stewards, I should say, that are, from a day-to-day perspective, managing that data to make sure that it is being governed in the way that it should. But that responsibility for data, as I said, it's from different perspectives, because data will move throughout our organisation, and at different points you may have a BI area that's responsible for the KPIs, but they're using the data that has been generated at source in a billing system, which will have a different business owner. So it becomes very complicated, or very complex, I guess, and it requires a lot of collaboration, which comes back to this idea that it's our data, and as an organisation at an organisational level, and from a different perspectives. Again, we've got security, we've got privacy. They have their own accountability and responsibility to make sure that the data that we have in our organisation is being handled in the way it should, to ensure compliance to regulations. That is obviously, like I mentioned before, is essential, both from a, nobody wants that bad PR, they don't want to be in the press, but they certainly don't want the fines either for non-compliance. So it is critical to the business. And as mentioned before, also, the quality of our data and managing that data life cycle. So from the point where it comes in at source all the way through to the consumption, we want to know that the data that we receive in our reports is right, and that it's right for the first time and every time. We spend so much time, as mentioned in the previous presentation, we go back to our data team. This doesn't look right. Not sure why, not sure what, but this doesn't look right. And then it ping-pongs around the organisation trying to work out, is it a data quality issue? Is it an ETL issue? Is it, what's the actual problem that we're seeing? So it's key that every part of the business plays its role in bringing data governance into fruition, and actually seeing it as part of their day job to make sure that we are looking after our data the way that we should. So how do we then make that happen? So how do we ensure that everybody in the business is holding up to their accountability? This brings me to challenge number 2. So we need that executive sponsorship. Whilst the request or the requirement for data governance might not necessarily come from top down, because they're not there seeing the pains of the data issues that are seen at throughout the organisation, but the need bubbles up, as I mentioned before, and without executive sponsorship, trying to ensure to make each business area accountable for data is going to be a struggle. You need that top down view that this must happen and why it needs to happen. And so getting them over the line is probably the most key thing that you can do to really start and move or drive the data governance agenda. As an organisation, and Liberty Global, like most other organisations, where everyone's busy, right? We have always just enough resources to do the job at hand. This feels like an extra responsibility. So why should we do it? Is often the question. We want to be looking at the latest product. How do we, build growth into our business and get more customers over the line? So we're competing with resources. We know that from the outset. We are competing with some very busy people, especially, as mentioned, the data teams, but also the business people, marketing. They're all busy trying to, do that the next big thing that's going to help the organisation. But we're also regularly met with the challenge that actually we're looking at data governance is a foundation for compliance and regulation, but actually people see that as not being, it's already being handled, right? We've got a security team, we've got a privacy team, they're already doing it. But actually this is where the clarity of the policies needs to really step up and have clear organisation policies that are aligned and are really clear about who is responsible and accountable for what, and what everybody's individual responsibility is towards ensuring that we comply with those policies. And then finally, looking at data quality. Data quality, we're looking at tracing and tracking our data, and I've talked about it with coming from source to consumption. And we want to build trust in our data. We want people to trust the data that they see that first time right, every time right. If I get a report, I want to know that it's accurate. I want to even have if I can, I want a score on it. Right? We score our kids' homework. We want a score on a report. If someone gives me a report, I want to know what percentage of accuracy is that. What is the quality stamp on that report? Before I make a key business decision, we should be ensuring that that our execs understand that potentially if there is a garbage in, garbage out situation, or even we know that it's 20% accurate, or it's 60% accurate, it's 8% accurate, it's not a bad thing if something's 20% accurate, right? It might be very relevant for the type of data that it is. We take some data from external sources, but it can give us a guide of, we can make a judgment of that as a business. The point is that the person who is viewing the data, who understands the context of that data, should also know the quality or what assessment what assessment's been done so that they can evaluate how much, whether to take it with a pinch of salt or not, and be able to trust the decisions that they make off the back of it. So again, this is where people assume that data architecture, data management are taking care of this, but their job is to look at how we manage our data and ensuring that we have the clear standards and procedures in place, whether that's naming conventions or just the way that we handle our data. If that's correct, then that's their job done. Then they would not be responsible for the actual data itself and the context of the data, and that comes back to the business. So how do we actually go about implementing data governance and dealing with this, by getting this buy-in from our execs? And really, for me, it's been, from my experience, it's been actually building that foundation, doing your homework and actually looking at how do I bring the people, process, technology, the usual, the top three, how do I bring that to life? How do I make that actually happen for the business? So who is actually involved? So we've already said that data governance is the responsibility of the whole organisation, but how do we actually do that? What are the roles and responsibilities that are going to do that? What are the forums that we need to have in place to ensure that that actually happens? Who's going to attend those forums? How are they going to, what are they expected to actually do? And then underpinning that, what are the processes, right? So, I mean, nothing's going to, happen without looking at your key business processes and understanding how they need to change or how they need to be supplemented with additional processes to ensure that our data is being governed correctly. So what business processes do we need to enable that governance? And finally, technology. I mean, as with anything else, I would not recommend doing this all on Excel, unless you're a small organisation, of course, but certainly in a large organisation, we're going to need a tool. You may find that you already have a tool, but I really felt that, from my experience again, that doing your homework is really important. So we did a very, very detailed requirements gathering and assessment of multiple different tools, some of which were incumbent, but looking at our requirements and making sure that whichever tool you're selecting is meeting those requirements. Now, those requirements have come from having done your homework, right? From looking at business processes, speaking to people, understanding the business problems that we're trying to solve, so that we can come back with a good proposal. For us, we selected ab initio for the fact that it would give us what we needed at speed. We needed to very quickly build a data catalogue, and this was the tool that we felt worked best for us. And that homework is important, right? Because this is part of your business case. You've got to build that business case to get your execs over the line. You need to understand what is driving the need for data governance and how we're going to meet those needs. So you mentioned some of these before, but to stay compliant to your regulation is obviously always key. So one of our biggest supporters in our data governance journey were the security team and the privacy teams. We were very aligned, worked as a working group right from the outset for all of the planning stage, and we invested a lot of time up front to make sure that, like I said, those requirements that we gathered were from all of the relevant parties. It was data management, it was security, it was privacy. And, you know, we looked at, so the data governance, myself and colleague, we went business domain by business domain. We spoke to key business stakeholders to understand what issues they were seeing with their data so that we could make sure that what we were going to deliver from a data governance perspective actually met their requirements, right, and would have helped with the issues that they were seeing, and demonstrating that it would drive operational efficiency, that we would be driving more reliable and consistent data, because we'd have that transparency of data. We would have that through available through this tooling, but also we were going to have these processes and people, roles and responsibilities in place to enable it. And all of this obviously would enable the business to make those key business decisions a lot quicker. So in delivering this successful data governance, we would then be able to drive what ultimately every business wants, which is to spend less time on errors and corrective actions, and therefore increasing revenue through being able to make trust our data and make those smart business decisions. So, as mentioned there, what did we do? We had to define the framework, define those roles and responsibilities, make sure you're collaborating in your policies and processes so that you're not working in a silo, you're collaborating with other areas of the business that have responsibility around governance or around data in general, and then build the business case, use case by use case, to get that initial investment, that seed investment, to bring in your tooling, but and get that buy-in from the execs to give you that investment. So, to another poll, which one driver would you feel most impacts the data governance agenda in your organisation? So this would be very interesting to me too. So I wanted to know, you know, what do you think it is? Is it the threat of fines and bad PR that would drive it in your organisation, or has driven it if you're already on your data governance journey? Is it just in doing the right thing, having standardization of your data across the organisation, so in adhering to industry best practice, knowing that you're doing things by the book? Is it having trust in your data, ensuring good quality data for good quality business decisions? Or is it financial growth, investment, return on investment, which, as I mentioned before, we demonstrated in our business case, and that works for some, right? I haven't put all of the above in here because I want to know which one is the most impactful. So I'll give you a bit of time to do that. Okay, let's see. Wow, threat of fines is really high, and ensuring trusted data. Interesting, you know, 0% on doing standardization and best practice. Okay, and return on investment's pretty good. Okay, so yeah. So I think trusted data, absolutely, for me, that was you know, when I was there at the beginning of my journey, I was there hollering trust a lot, because, you know, and it is impactful, because I think as an organisation, when we did do that sort of canvassing, this was a couple of years back, you know, it was very much the feeling that most of our business key stakeholders would say, we have a gut feeling that our data might not be very accurate. We have a gut feeling that the quality might be poor, but we just don't know. And we can only do what we can with what we have. And so, yeah, I totally agree with that one. But, yeah, very interesting that nobody wants to be in the press with bad PR, right? So challenge number 3, so working, it's a different way of working, and there's no getting away from it. You know, at the end of the day, data governance is a big shift in the way that we look at our data. And actually, you know, we've been talking for a few years now about data being the new oil, and data's the big thing. But actually, investing time and effort and energy into our data has been a slow journey. So how are we tackling this? So, you know, there was talk at the beginning saying we need a big transformational, you know, effort to do this, but it's just what I didn't feel that we were going to get the traction that we needed, and actually that's really expensive. and when you're already just getting your execs over the line, and you know that this is an investment up front and is going to be a little bit costly at the beginning, but actually you do get your return on investment, but it's going to take time to get that. And initially, a lot of the drivers for doing it is actually that bad PR that we don't want. We want to know that we're looking after our data the way that we should be, as be compliant to our regulations, etc. So actually, our approach was very much bit by bit, look at the core business data, look at our critical data, that what is core to the operations in our organisation, and deal with those areas in that way. So we started building this communication. Data literacy was obviously really key, and it was mentioned previously that actually a lot of the people in our business don't get it, right? They get that we use data, and they see it as an IT thing. IT is looking after our data and we're just going to use it. But actually building that data literacy, which both security do, privacy do, but we've also launched a data awareness, data governance training module that builds awareness and understanding of data, and just some of those terms, the fact that there is business ownership and that there is data stewardship and what those roles need to do, and actually that the fact that data is an enterprise-wide asset and that is everybody's responsibility. So just, I think that communication is really, really key. I can't stress it enough. And when you're speaking to the business, going domain by domain, understanding what problems do they have with data, what issues do they see most, and which data do they feel is most critical to their operations, and working with those data sets and with those applications as your prioritised roadmap is obviously going to get you that sponsorship at every level and in every part of the organisation. And whenever you're having those conversations, always bringing it back to how data governance can help make it real, in demonstrating the benefits. So we built the forums. We put the forums in place. We've excuse me. We've defined all of these different roles and these forums and what their responsibilities are, and how the processes behind each of these different forums would enable the prioritisation, the allocation of resource and budget, and then the working groups to actually make sure that the implementation happens, to make sure that actually we're addressing the prioritised data sets by business area, and those business areas are kept on the journey. We're having those conversations, we're keeping everybody in the loop, and we're bringing the data, the business domain into the conversation at these various levels across the whole organisation. So, in summary then, governance itself may be a dirty word, but actually data governance is a really key business function. And the top 3 obstacles, just to summarise, that we've had on our journey has been around business data ownership, executive sponsorship to make that ownership, business ownership happen, and then driving that organisational change. So, but just to reiterate that with patience and planning, and I really do think planning is key, you've got to do that investment up front, so you've got the answers, you know how it's going to work, you can make it feel real to your stakeholders. It's really, really key, and persistence, because this is not a one-off challenge. This is embedding an actual change in your organisations that's there for the long term, and persistence is going to be necessary. It is a slow but long journey. I hope that's been helpful, and I will hand over. I will say thank you and hand over to Catherine for Q&A.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. So we've had a couple comments come in from people that viewed your first poll, and I just wanted to read them to you in case you wanted to kind of reply to those. So the first person wrote in and said, "The none of the above for me relates to the fact that people don't understand what data governance is yet is where I am, and I'm sure it will change once I tell them." And then the second person wrote in and said, "I think a key driver is that organisations don't necessarily understand the return of investment of data governance activities." So I wanted to give you a moment to see if you wanted to reply to either of those kind of remarks.
Yeah, no, definitely. So completely agree. And that's the challenge that we saw was that level of understanding of data is limited. You know, people see data as, like I said, oh yeah, somebody somewhere's got an application, or somebody somewhere's got a data store, it's in a data center somewhere. It's IT's job to look after it. We just run a report. You know, I just run this report and I just make a decision. But actually, the moment you've generated that report, you requested that report, and they don't. And for the business to understand that if you're requesting that report exists because of you. Therefore, you are accountable for that report. And if it shouldn't exist anymore, then have it decommissioned. But whilst it is in existence, you are accountable for it. So if the quality of that report is poor, it's on you to drive the improvement. You know, and it's that level of understanding, and that's why for us building the data governance awareness module, the training module, it's a mandatory training module that will be done every year by everybody to build that understanding of what data is and whose responsibility it is. It's really key. The second point, I've already forgotten what it was. What was the second remark?
So that one was about not necessarily understanding the return of investment on data governance activity.
Yeah, so again, this is where I was saying the upfront, the work that we did was, you know, go business to business, speak to those MDs if you can, the VP. Well, VPs and directors are great because they are the ones that are dealing with the problems, right? They're the ones that are, you know, faced with the challenge of how do I deal with this situation, or I don't have the data I need, I don't have, you know, and speak to them and understand what the issues are that they're seeing, and look at, okay, what's causing it, what's driving it, look deeper into the data itself. So one of the big examples that we used was there was a project that was going to migrate from one application to another in one of our European countries, and actually trying to do that data migration. They worked through that data model multiple times, and it was costing them time and budget on the project. The project overran. By the time they actually went live, they still had a downstream issue, had to roll it back, make another change, and go back again. And the saving that we demonstrated that they would have had they been able to see and understand the structure of that data upfront, to be able to you know, do that migration more smoothly, spoke for itself. And that's how you get that buy-in from the business.
Brilliant. And we've to move on now, because we've had a host of fantastic questions come in, and I don't think we're going to get through them all, but we'll give it our best shot. So this person's written in and said, "Hi Dee, I'd be interested to know how the organisation is structured, i.e. are you in the CDO organisation or IT? This sometimes is a blocker and difficult to bring businesses on governance on the governance journey. Have you experienced this, and what has helped?" Great question.
Right. Okay. So I think it would be great to have a CDO, and having a CDO at the board level, having somebody who is data savvy, understands the data, and can communicate that level of understanding to the rest of the board would be absolutely fantastic. We do have that in Virgin Media, but we didn't at the time while I worked in Virgin Media, but I've moved to Liberty Global and we don't actually have a CDO organisation there. So I was in IT at one point doing data governance, and I agree, it's a challenge, right? Because people see you as being part of IT, therefore your job is to just take care of it, and we're just going to be the users of the data. Whereas more recently, you know, I've lobbied this and got my request. We moved out of IT. We're still in the service delivery organisation, so still coming under technology and innovation, so sort of linked to sort of the IT side of the organisation, I should say. But we're not actually. I'm no longer in IT. So so we've moved under strategy and commercial management. So having that strategy banner, not being in IT, yes, I'm in service delivery, but actually that in itself is a big support, because the moment I say, yeah, no, I'm not part of IT, you know, we're more about the strategy of how we're managing our data, and actually we want to be able to make sure that data management that sits in IT is handling data in the right way, and those governance, those policies and procedures are in place as well. So yeah, I definitely do feel that data governance struggles if it is sat in IT. Ideally, it would sit in a CDO organisation.
Brilliant. Now, we've had a few questions come in about positionality, so I apologise if I don't ask your specific question, but I'm going to merge them together. So where did you start with your governance programme? Is there an area which logically came first for you? For example, this person gave data industry versus inventory, versus data management.
Okay, so I would say data inventory if it was out of those two. The way that I approached it, as I mentioned before, was building this business case by business, use case by use case examples of how data governance was going to help the organization. So we kind of then built a roadmap of prioritized use cases that we would want to address. And looked at, it worked closely with those business areas. So one of the key areas was actually the core KPIs that we reported to the city. We wanted to make sure that we had that full lineage of how those KPIs were generated. So they were very keen to work with us because obviously, we're reporting those numbers to the city. We want to know that they're as accurate and governed as possible. But obviously, at the same time, around the same period, GDPR came in, and we had a lot of, there's been a lot of securities things that have been happening. So actually, we kind of were asked to shift our focus to security and privacy, so looking at PI inventory and making sure that we were building the inventory of what data exists and where, and handing that over to security and privacy to make sure that they could apply their assessments and making sure everything was kept, all of our key critical data elements were being kept secure, and that PI was being handled the way it should. So there's two ways to go about it, two different approaches.
Brilliant. Just looking at the clock, I think we've got time for one more. We'll dive into this one. I would be interested to see how the tool selection questions before the activity would be changed now that you've gone through it. Were there any factors that you wished you had thought of earlier?
That's a good one. To be honest, we're really happy with the tool that we chose, and the more I've gone into it, the more I've realised that I am really happy with the tools that I've chosen. I think, is there anything different? So I think one of the struggles that we do have is that, like any other organisation, we have multiple tools in our tool bag, as in the organisation itself. We have so many different applications. For presentation of data alone, we have something like 13 different presentation tools, and I think that's similar in many organisations. Lots of people I've spoken to have voiced the same, and this is where it's difficult to find a tool that can connect to every single different type of data source. Obviously, the big ones, your Oracles and some of these, your Hadoops and whatever of the world, yes, you can connect to those, and most vendors of tooling will have a good connector to those. But when you come up with something a bit obscure, that's going to be a challenge. And you don't really want to be stating your lineage. You want to be able to actually take that from the systems itself. But if you haven't got a connector and it's going to take too long to build, that's going to be a struggle, and it's going to hold you back. So you have to kind of make a judgment on that. And that's probably the biggest limiter that we've seen. Other than that, our tool pretty much does what we need it to.
Brilliant. I think that is all the time we have for today, Dee. Thank you so much for joining us. I will tell you now, in the question box, we just keep getting people write in saying, great presentation, loving this. So you're having a lot of love as well as a lot of questions. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
So thank you everyone for joining us today. It's been another great session and I hope you've enjoyed it. Do be sure to take that selfie quickly now and pop it up on LinkedIn using the hashtag Data Champions Online. I can see a few of you have done it already, so you're in with the chance of winning those AirPods. Now, join us again tomorrow where we'll be talking in our final day about reaching new data potentials. And we are going to be joined by HPE, Swiss Re, Goldman Sachs, Women in Data and Addison Lee. So we have a whole stack of great people for you to listen to. So until then, stay safe. Thank you and goodbye.
Bye.